That's what's going to bring change, is just that natural spirit of love and your heart being tugged at. Love is what fueled the first abolition movement here in Rochester, and love is what is going to carry on Rochester's legacy for abolition. Now, speaking of Rochester's legacy, the Center for Youth has that exact heart and love that I'm talking about. They are, as I like to refer to them, Rochester's modern-day Underground Railroad. They are doing what needs to be done here in Rochester to protect our youth. Their passion and mission for justice for children is exactly why for the second year we've chosen to partner with them. And I'm really excited for you guys to again hear from them. We have a friend here tonight, or we have friends here tonight. I want to let you know first from both their street outreach programs and their Safe Harbor program, which you'll hear a little bit more about tonight. It's my pleasure to introduce Nicole Thompson, and she works as the Safe Harbor coordinator for the Center for Youth. Here, Nicole, grab a ticket.
731-5590. I'm always a little disappointed at this moment where I come up on a stage and take a mic and Kanye West doesn't jump out of anywhere. It's always kind of sad for me. All right. They're gonna get Kanye for next year. The first thing I want to explain is the Safe Harbor program and what that means. So Safe Harbor is actually a legal concept. It means that safe harbor from prosecution, and that you can't be prosecuted for something that might otherwise be considered a crime, and that there's good legal reason in the interest of justice that you won't be prosecuted for that crime. So when I first started my career working with victims of commercial sexual exploitation, we were prosecuting young people for prostitution. And in the jurisdiction that I worked in, young people as young as 11 were being arrested and charged for prostitution and placed in secure facilities as a result. So what we know is that human trafficking isn't new. It's not something that's new to the young people that we work with. It's not something that's new to the world. It's something that's been around for a very, very long time. But what we've done is try to shift the way that we look at it and shift at the young people who are victims of it and see them as victims instead of as criminals. In 1974, the National Runaway and Homeless Youth Act was passed, and that act was actually passed in order to try and prevent the need for young people to engage in commercial sexual exploitation or be trafficked. The language was very different then it was considered child prostitution, and that was the word that was used, but that was still what the intent was. And so Center for Youth has really been providing services to young people who are victims of human trafficking long before they were considered victims of human trafficking. So one of the things that we did when we first started to address human trafficking as an issue, and we really as a society and as a culture started to look at this as an issue, is we started to address it outside the country first. And there was kind of this "it doesn't happen here" mentality. It was something that happened overseas. It was something that happened in Southeast Asia. And organizations like Love 146, like ECPAT, and like Polaris Project did phenomenal work working overseas. Another thing that those agencies helped to do was they helped us to realize that these were not only things that were happening outside our borders, but that they were also things that were happening right here. And when I say right here, I do mean right here in Monroe County. So between 2008 and 2012, when the legislation passed that said basically that young people couldn't be arrested for the purposes of prostitution because they were, by law, victims of human trafficking. So that legislation for the first time said that if you engage in an act that you can't legally consent to, you can't be charged with it. So from the time that happened in 2008 to 2012, when our program started, New York State was able to identify 36 young people who were victims of human trafficking. Now what we know from Runaway and Homeless Youth programs, from our partners in child welfare, from other agencies, is that number is insanely low. There's no way that that's true, that there were really less than 40 young people being trafficked in New York State. So once the Safe Harbor programs were up and running and we're really actively looking and really actively seeking to engage with these young people and offer them services, what we found here in Monroe County in 2014 is that we identified 87 young people who either were victims of human trafficking or at high risk, and 22 of those young people that we worked with were confirmed victims of human trafficking, meaning that they made a disclosure, that they did state that they were being trafficked. We suspect the number is larger of the 87, that more of them were actually victims of commercial sexual exploitation, but for many good reasons, young people don't always tell us everything that's happening in their lives. So we know that it's happening here. We know that it's happening in Monroe County. We know that it's happening across school districts, that it's not something that just happens in a particular socioeconomic status. We know that it happens everywhere. We often talk about that one of the statistics we keep is zip codes, is the zip code where the young person lives, and what we know is we've hit every zip code in Monroe County. There's no place that we have not seen a young person who either is being trafficked or has a history of being trafficked or is at very significant risk for human trafficking. So one of the things that we get asked a lot is to meet one of our young people or to meet a person who's a victim of human trafficking. That's something that people really want to experience. And one of the things that's always kind of strange to me about that is I always wonder what people are going to expect. Because what we have when we work with our young people and we meet with them are kind of typical teenagers. We have young people who are really smart, really funny, really engaging, sometimes a little bit difficult, sometimes not always cooperative, but they're teenagers, and they're not all that different than the teenagers you probably interact with on a regular basis. So one of the things that is a little bit different about our young people, even though they may not look different in the beginning, and you may not be able to tell from looking at them that they're a victim of human trafficking, is that they've survived, and they've survived a lot. And they've had a lot of experiences, and they've been able to develop skills to help them survive those experiences. So what we know is that in the United States, every 6 minutes, a young person dies as a result of child abuse. We know that about 1 in 7 girls and 1 in 9 boys are victims of child sexual abuse before they reach the age of 18. And what we know is that most of the young people who we work with who are victims of human trafficking have experienced one or both of those. So what we know is that often they've already survived several experiences of areas of abuse. They may have been exposed to domestic violence, they may have been exposed to child sexual abuse, they may have been exposed to physical abuse. But very often, this is not the first time that they're a victim of a crime. To give you an example of some of the young people that we worked with a young woman who had a very complicated and difficult relationship with her mother, but a loving relationship nonetheless. She was in high school and was a cheerleader, was a good student. There wasn't really a significant history of behavioral issues. And then there were some things that happened in the family that made it really difficult for her to be able to stay at home. And so she was kind of what we would call couch surfing. So she was jumping from house to house and staying with different friends and on different places. What eventually happened is that she met this woman who said to her, "This is ridiculous. You shouldn't have to be carrying your stuff around in a bag like that. You need a place to stay. You need to be safe. This is crazy. You shouldn't have to be fighting for a place to sleep every night. I have a place. I have a spare bedroom. Why don't you come and stay with me?" And this sounded awesome to the kid. This was like a great opportunity. This was something that was really a very hopeful moment for her. And so she went and stayed with this woman. And she stayed with her for a little while, and things were okay. There really weren't too many issues staying there. It was certainly a lot less difficult than staying at home. And she was fed, she was clothed, she was safe. She started to realize that there were more and more kids her age and a little bit older that were kind of coming in and out of the house, that were spending time there. And she thought that was a little strange, but then she also thought, hey, this lady helps kids out. Over time, what happened, and what we often see happen with our young people, is that this woman that she was staying with said, "Look, if you're going to keep staying here, if you're going to be here and you're going to be here with me and I'm going to feed you and clothe you and have you in this house, you're going to have to find some way to earn your keep." And at this point, this young person, because she'd been away from home so long, there was a warrant that if police came in contact with her, they would pick her up and take her back to court. And so she said, it's not like you can go apply for a job. You can't go work at McDonald's because you have a warrant out for you. So I happen to know a few people who told me that they think that you're really amazing and beautiful, so much so that they would pay to have sex with you. And so since you're part of this family and you're here living with us, that's what we would ask you to do to kind of earn your keep. And so this young woman was stuck. This was a safe place. This was a place where she felt connected. She was getting needs met that she couldn't get met anyplace else. And so she agreed. And once she agreed the first time, then it was easy to keep her. Because then it became, what are you gonna do? You're gonna go home to your mom? You're gonna go tell your mom what you did? You're gonna tell your mom that you were a prostitute? Is that what you're gonna do? What about your grandma? How about if I posted on your brother's Facebook page? And so this person was able to develop a really significant psychological hold over this young person and keep her there for a period of time. Even though she wasn't tied, she wasn't bound, she wasn't restricted in her movement in a lot of ways, psychologically there was a really significant hold over her. Now this young person ultimately was able to seek us out with the help of one of our local law enforcement agencies and is now employed full-time, has her own place, is doing really, really well. But there's a lot of different ways that her path could have gone. And I think that a situation like that is just one more thing that shows us how much these kids are able to survive, how much they have survived, and how resourceful and capable they really are. One of the other things that we know about our young people is that there's lots of different ways that they get tricked into trafficking. It's not, I think sometimes we hear from people in the community, well, they wanted to do it. This is what they wanted to do. But often what happens is they're starting off getting offered one thing and ending up with something completely different. And the thing that all of our young people have in common, all of the young people we work with who've been trafficked have in common, is that they all had a need that wasn't being met, that the trafficker was somehow able to meet. So it may have been that need for unconditional love. It may have been that need for a place to stay. It may have been the need for safety. It may have been that need for recognition. It may have been that need for attention. It may have been a need for food or other basic needs, but the trafficker was able to meet those needs. And when we watch interviews and we listen to traffickers when they're interviewed by law enforcement, and they talk about their recruiting policies and they talk about how they were able to get these young people into these situations, one of the things that they consistently say is, we don't go for the kid that has a stable home life and that has lots of supports and has lots of friends. Because when they leave and they come with us and we're having them work, people are going to be looking for them, and that's going to slow us down, and that's going to be more difficult for us. It's easier if we go for the kids on the fringes. It's easier if we go for kids who don't have a lot of friends, who don't have a lot of connections, who maybe their family isn't going to look all that hard when they're gone. And a lot of times those are the kids that have a history of running away, or the kids in foster care, or the kids in the juvenile justice system. And all of those are things that increase the risk that this is a kid who's going to look really good to a trafficker and that a trafficker might try to recruit. One of the other things that we know is that traffickers are not, 49% of people who are arrested and charged for trafficking are women. So it's not something that just men are perpetuating this crime. We will just recently, locally here in Monroe County, had a situation where 7 people were arrested for human trafficking, 3 of them were women. We have another case that's a very well-known case locally where 2 sisters were arrested and ultimately convicted of human trafficking. So it's not just men who are involved in this. I think sometimes when we come to crimes that are sex crimes, we tend to lean that way. But the reality of it is that it's just as many women as it is men. So what these people are really good at is being able to extort and find a way to capitalize on whatever weakness this young person has or whatever this need this person has. In a really kind of like demented, twisted way, it makes me think of the Shel Silverstein book, The Missing Piece. I don't know if any of you guys are familiar with that. It's about this, it's kind of like a pie with a piece missing that is rolling around looking for its missing piece. And in some ways what the traffickers do is they become that missing piece for the young person. And so you may hear stories from a young person about it sounds like several different people who are actually the same person because that person presents differently to each young person. They'll meet whatever that need is that that young person has.